Finish up the level 1 of the quick start to modeling in Maya by just talking about cleaning up our scene and also talk about our assignment between levels. So just kind of jump back in where we left off. So one of the things that we want to do once we get the modeling done is we just want to prepare our model to continue its life down the pipeline. So, if you're working on some sort of a project, maybe a game, then this model is meant to be textured or maybe even rigged and animated and incorporated into the game. Or if you're working on a feature or a television show, maybe it's destined, again, to be rigged and animated, maybe textured and incorporated into a shot in some way. So in any case, most of the time, another artist is going to be moving this along the pipeline, and eventually this is going to be residing in a scene with a lot of different objects. And so, we want to minimize the problems that are going to pop up with this model. We don't want it to come back to us to have to redo work. We don't want any errors, anything that's going to cause problems throughout the pipeline. So, there are very specific kind of pipeline-specific things that you may need to do depending on where you are. And those are things that you have to work out with the people that you work with. But we'll just talk about some very general things that you want to be aware of as you begin to prepare your model. So, we've selected all of these pieces, and we can just make sure that we delete the history for that. So we don't want any extra history on these that we don't need. We can also freeze the transformations. Now, in some cases, you may not want to freeze the transformations if you've sort of rotated something into place. But if it's kind of the basic position that it's going to be, then you can go in and freeze your transformations as well, kind of zero everything out. You typically will want it to be at the origin. And so here you can see that it's sitting not on the ground, but the 0 point is actually in the middle. So I'm going to go ahead and move this up. And you can see here that actually we're not totally grouped together yet. And so we want to create an overall group for this array. So we've got our 3 legs. So we'll click on those. We'll also click on the panel group because we want to keep that as a group. And then the base. Let's hit Control G to group that together. And we'll just call this solar array. And now we have one overall group that encompasses everything. We can go ahead and delete our curves. And now we'll take this and let's just move it up so it's sitting right on top of the grid. So I'll move it all the way up there. And if you want to, because when you bring this in, if you were to bring this into a scene and then sit it on the ground and then you try to scale it, it's going to scale through the ground. So one of the things that you can do is to just move the pivot. So we'll go ahead and snap this pivot back down. And we can kind of move it back down to the origin. And so now what happens is you bring it into your scene and you need to scale it. It scales right across the ground, which is what we want. All right, let's go ahead and freeze our transformations. We moved it up above the grid. We'll go ahead and freeze it. We can also begin to check the geometry itself. So the normals are kind of what tells the software which part of the model is facing out versus which is the inside. And one of the quick ways to tell if we have any normal problems is to go to lighting and turn off two-sided lighting. Now, all of this geometry is correct because this is the outside, and this black part is actually should be the inside, so it's confused as to what should be facing out, what should be facing in. Now, we're using two-sided lighting. It's fine because it treats them both the same. But just to be safe, we want to go ahead and reverse those normals. And so the way that we do this on a polygon and on a NURBS are both going to be a little bit different. So on a polygon object, all we'll do is go to polygons, normals, and we'll go ahead and reverse normals. And we'll do the same thing down here and here. And then on all of these polygonal shapes, we do the same thing. Come in here and reverse those normals. Now for a piece of NURBS geometry, it's going to be a little bit different. We'll go to Surfaces, Edit NURBS, and let's reverse the surface direction. And we'll do the same thing on all of these NURBS pieces. Do the same thing down here. And on all of these. And get those all kind of cleaned up here. Okay. Now we've got this normal over here, so we're going to go ahead and delete the history again, just to keep it clean. We want to also make sure to just check the naming. So remember, we went through and named everything in the leg. We've got the base named, the panel, all that stuff is named. The naming convention is going to be up to you and your pipeline. Sometimes you'll want to keep a prefix of whatever it is above the level. So in this case, it would be solar array. And then here, this would be solar underscore array underscore leg underscore C. So you start to get some long names, but it's very clear what belongs to what. You know, if you bring this into a scene with something else that has a leg underscore C, then that can get confusing. But if you include the upper levels of each of these, then it's very, you're very clear about what it is that you're naming that. So, you can do that as well. We've kept the panel rotate group, so we can still come in here and rotate this around if we need to, but we can also, move the array around like that. Okay, so that's just a few little things to think about when you're kind of finishing up a model and getting it ready to go. So we kind of talked about just a few of the basic modeling tools in Maya. This is level 1, so we're starting to just get into modeling, building different shapes, using different tools, some of the different concepts, smoothing versus not keeping it as a low polygon object, where to add edges and how to use those tools to add edges in order to be able to manipulate the different shapes. And so I think you've done a great job following along and creating this simple solar array. Between now and level 2, as you continue on with this process, I think it would be a good idea to take the skills that you've learned and the tools that you've learned and apply it to something different. So instead of following along, try to kind of use your imagination and build something on your own using some of the same concepts that we talked about. So do some searching online, can find something, maybe even something different like this satellite. It has the panels that you can create, and then it has some simple shapes that you can build, cylindrical shapes, but it still has those edges you can add in there and start to do some extrusions, can do some duplication, do some revolving with some NURBS curves. So maybe something like a satellite, something very similar to our solar array, but something different enough that you'll have to do some critical thinking and figuring out how to build that. Maybe something more along the lines of this where you've got different shapes in there. So there's a lot of different things that you can do just looking online at some different images of models people have done and some actual images. Here's more of a kind of a dish, so a little bit more complex maybe. So coming in here and creating just some solar panels. So have a little bit of fun with it, but I do want you to take some time and create your own model, something similar to this with kind of some similar pieces, maybe, as I said, a communications array or a satellite even, something like that. And then in the next level, we're going to come in and start to take what we've learned and kind of layer some more information on top of that, add in some new information, and we'll build a more complex model than this. So we'll begin to build something a little bit more kind of complicated and something that looks a little bit nicer even too. So we'll kind of gear up as we go through these levels 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 5 as far as the complexity of the models that we create, and just kind of get you used to it, get used to using the tools and the technique. So I hope you've enjoyed going through this level 1 of the quick start to modeling in Maya. I know I've enjoyed being with you for the last hour or so. So have fun with the assignment. We'll see you in the next level.